Thank you, Aditya. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session. I'm basically not going to teach anybody about being an entrepreneur. There are plenty of people. Many of you are successful. You are probably online, and you've done or seen more than probably what I have seen. As a VC or as a analyst in my previous avatar. The point really is, I'm going to give you a perspective on how VCs think about entrepreneurship, and what their expectations are from either their companies which they are targeting or companies they are in their which are there in their portfolio. So before we kind of go, dive straight into the content we have, I think the first and the foremost thing for all the entrepreneurs who are here and those who are contemplating being an entrepreneur, congratulations. You've taken a bold step. Not easy to leave a cushy job. And my favorite anecdote is author Ketan Bhagat, he says, there's knocker and knockery, right? So you moved away from that. So congratulations. We all know there's a digital revolution impending in the market. You look at how disruption is coming to all the industries, whether it is AI driven or robotics in manufacturing or just digital health, right? So there is disruption happening everywhere, and the opportunity is for you to kind of take. Now when we when we talk about entrepreneurship, we come across several kind of perspectives. Some of the people say they want to change the world, and frankly, the ones who think or are crazy enough, as I said, they're the ones who can actually do it. The second is there are some people who actually want to make meaning, and they want to have some flexibility in what they're trying to do. They have certain dreams and they want to add some value. So social impact ventures, for example, whether it is in agriculture or health tech or clean tech, those are also viable entrepreneurship models. It's just that not everybody needs to make profit and add value, but at the same time, the reason why businesses exist is fundamentally to do job creation and add value to economic value to the society. So do think about these things before you kind of take the entrepreneurial plunge. Now no VC is, I'm going to tell you a few things which are internally well known in the VC world, but not exactly well known overall in the market, right? So what does a VC provide? Okay, I think that's fundamentally a question which we get asked all the time, and I think there are two answers to that. The first is they provide mentoring. So we come across several startups will say, oh, I know this industry very well, I've been around here for last 2-3 years, I have a minimal viable product, I spent 10 years in the same industry, so I know it all, and my product is better than anybody else in the market. And what they would tend to do is make a quadrant and put themselves right on the far right above compared to anybody in the competition. Now that is a very risky thing to do unless you actually can substantiate and prove it. And the proof of that is either market share or revenue. There is no other metric. Perception or client feedback, those kind of things don't matter at all. The second thing which we come across regularly across these issues with startups is, why isn't the VC paying me for trying or from what I'm trying to achieve? Now you need to understand the way the VC model works is, if you look at from a regulatory standpoint of view, when anybody raises a VC fund, a small part of their own net worth, or in certain cases even 100% of their own net worth, is invested as risk capital. And they also go and look for funds outside, which are called limited partners in the fund. So eventually, it's all about shareholder value. They actually have to give returns to their limited partners. So the point really is, VCs are here to make, provide mentoring, provide risk capital, which as you cannot get from banks, and eventually make introductions for you. If they invest in you, they will make introductions. They will take you to companies where they think they have have connections, and be able to introduce you to a lot of companies, who would potentially be buyers of your products or services or solutions, right? The second big issue or misconception in the market is that how does a VC, kind of collaborate? Now, there are various forms of, venture capital models in the industry. And so let's talk about those for a minute. There are VC firms which will have ideas and they'll say, I have an idea, I will find an operating team to run it. So example of that is the Swiss firm called Pioneering Ventures. They actually look for operating teams. They don't look for ideas. They have ideas of their own. The second type of VCs are those, or private equity funds, which actually take a controlling stake. They're a buyout firm which looks at the opportunity in the company and says, either by risk capital or merger, we will find ways to add value. Those are the type of VCs who actually take a hands-on operating role to run the company day to day and make it profitable. Typically these are distressed assets. The third type of VCs, which is the traditional VC model, we all understand, is the kind of companies who will say, I will make a small investment, take a small stake in you, and give you the growth capital which is required for you to run. And then when eventually that growth capital becomes the valuation increases, we will do an exit, right? So typically these are the three types of VC fund operations which you see in the market. And then apart from that, there are two other essential parts of the entire ecosystem: incubators, which help you get to the stage of a minimum viable product, and accelerators, which actually help you accelerate your time to market, for example. Now, the reason why I gave you this overview is that to help you understand that VCs frankly are not interested, with the exception of the buyout funds, in running your companies, but they are actually in the business of providing returns to the investors or LPs in their funds. So I think it's important to know that there's nothing to be insecure about. I've seen several other entrepreneurs who are like, why is this VC getting involved in this space? What does he really know about the space? Now the question, if you have those kind of thoughts, frankly, there are a couple of reasons why that has happened. One, you don't have a collaborative culture and between you and your investor. So my favorite phrase, when I deal with my portfolio companies, or I go out and meet with prospective portfolio companies, it's very similar. That think of investments like a marriage. If you will not marry this person, why would you get into this relationship? It's the same rules of relationship apply to the investment side, probably even higher, right? The other issue which we kind of come across very often is that the entrepreneurs are they expect to be paid for trying. The point really is they need to kind of deliver value and meaning more than anything else. And I think it's important that that no entrepreneur expects to be paid for trying. There have been moments of that. If you look at the the early 2000s, the .com boom, it was like that. It had reached a frenzy where if you wanted to get a haircut and there was a waiting, you had to give stock options or equity to your hairdresser. That was the the heights of the heights of greed in the market, right? So it's important that you think about what you're trying to achieve. Somebody asked me, what is a typical good target for a company like you? So I think all VCs want to look for somebody who's actually has built a sustainable business model. And when I say that, is that somebody who's already has enough traction in the market and he really doesn't need the growth capital. So you look at a lot of the large companies which have existed, there was no formal venture capital industry in India, and they still have been able to scale those enterprises. And funnily enough, a lot of these successful entrepreneurs have come back and either started their own venture capital firms, or they have become limited partners in some of the leading VCs. So they actually are paying back for whatever they have achieved. So a true target is not somebody who has AI and IoT or somebody who's cloud ready, but somebody who's built a sustainable business model and is executing without the need for a capital. And maybe in order to pivot or go to a new growth market or attack a new territory, that's when you start saying that maybe I should look for growth capital. Then the other thing which I like to emphasize is we come across several companies who would have no focus on branding and marketing. I would say even when you are building your product, now if you're building a product, for example, it takes about a year or year and a half to do that. Now, one approach is you put your heads down and say, guys, let's just continue to execute on this. A year down the line, we'll launch this minimal viable product. The problem in today's digital revolution, which is currently happening, that there is within a year the market would have moved or pivoted far ahead of what you are thinking. So there are only two ways to kind of avoid this solution problem. One is start branding and marketing from day one. And when I say day one, it doesn't mean you start branding and marketing your team or yourself as the CEO and the founder. This is a quintessential mistake which we see in current branding and marketing. You want to promote your product and your idea, not the execution team. When you are promoting the execution team, it kind of gives the connotation that you're more hungry for your own gratification, self-gratification, rather than on what you're trying to execute. So branding and marketing of what you're trying to achieve is extremely crucial. And I want to give another very, I want to give a very pedestrian kind of example. I was looking at a company and they were in the health tech space and they wanted a certain name. That certain name's domain was not available in the way they wanted it. So they actually built a 3-syllable name and then got a .org domain. Now, to somebody, it doesn't make a big difference. But the fact is, you have to understand that you are not a multilateral agency. You're not the United Nations or a non-government organization. So what you really need to do or focus on is build a brand where you can give it the right perspective. So it's important to do that. These are very small things, but yes, you cannot really change the name of the company a few years down the line. So my favorite quote on that is, so the founder of Oracle, Larry Ellison, is one of the biggest, richest men in this planet. He says, whenever somebody went to him and said, let's change the name of the product, what would he do? He would say, you can't rename a 10 or a 14-year-old child again. So that, it's very important that you think about these things right from day one. So whether it is a domain, the name, what it connotes, the kind of logo you should have, the kind of brand recall you have, all those things, need to be thought through. Another thing which, I want to kind of, emphasize is pivoting, right? I mean, we look at, when we evaluate at a fund, some of the startups, one of the things we look at is flexibility of the entrepreneur. Now, the flexibility of the entrepreneur is, is very important because, like I said, in today's digital world, the markets change very dynamically. And I think I remember reading on LinkedIn, while you're starting a startup, somewhere down the line, someone is already putting a name on a bullet for you, right? So while you're thinking about a certain idea, somebody's already thinking about disrupting that idea, right? So pivoting business models as and when required, based on market situations, is extremely important. And let's take the, why go far? Let's take the case of Amazon. If any of you have read some of the biographies written on him, or books by the Everything Store by Brad Stone, it very clearly says that Jeff Bezos aspired Amazon to be a technology company. But the fact of the matter is, until AWS was launched, Amazon was never a technology company. They were actually just a retailer. They were just an online retailer. So they were not exactly filing patents. It's only when Alexa has come out now and AWS has gained so much of traction in the market that Amazon finally is a technology company. So there's nothing wrong. Keep executing on what you're trying to do, but it's also extremely important to continue to see that you are available to pivot. And one of the things which I can't emphasize enough, whenever you start doing something, start with the intention that you want to be a market leader. If you cannot be among the top 3 in that segment, there is no point really doing it. And the fact is, nobody gets paid for trying. Everybody gets paid for bottom line. So the point really is, make sure whenever you start basically at a startup, measure it both in terms of top line and bottom line. There is no other metric which matters enough. So we've talked about some of the VC's perspective. I've shared some of the internals with you. What I'm going to talk about in the next 10 minutes is going to be a few best practices. These are based on my learnings, my interactions, both as an analyst and as a rookie VC now. The first is culture. We pay overemphasis on what I would call technology today. We say, let's hire somebody and then we'll see later on. But then what happens? We've been in situations where I want to share a situation. It happened with one of our to acquire a company, make an investment in a company in the US, and the two founders had fought. Now, one of the founders was very keen to take basically this funding, and the other co-founder basically would not sign on the shareholder agreement. So eventually, what happened? That guy eventually, even though he was going to lose his house because he had mortgaged it to start his company, because he did not get along with the co-founder, he did not sign on this legal papers. So the culture part, whether it is between the founders or among the the employees, I think is extremely important. I would say pay more premium and effort on it, because eventually what matters is that culture is top down. If the culture at the top is good, you will not have problem seeping it within your employees. And what has happened at Uber, everybody has read about it. There's a great examples of and I think now the reports are coming out, the valuation is down some 18 billion or something. So we keep reading about these crazy statistics. While there's no validation of any of these, the point really is the brand has taken a beating, and this is not something you want to do from a cultural perspective. So pay focus on that. The next point, I've already talked about it quite a bit, but I want to still emphasize, that no business is secure. If you're already thinking about starting something and you're in the minimal viable product stage, already think about where can I pivot it to. I'll give you an example. We potentially looked at an e-learning company in our space, and we said to the founder that you could run eventually a much bigger business if you pivoted the business to providing business services. So which is, you not only do the training of those skilled professionals, those blue collar workers, but also find a way to employ those and source those business professionals. So he was open to that pivoting, and eventually the business has kind of scaled. But the fact is that he was open and he knew that he was in the business, he was out to make money. That was more important. The third thing, again, I cannot emphasize enough. I've seen several startups who have done a lot of research in the market before they started it, but in the engineering and build phase, they have actually stopped interacting with customers. Now, why does that happen? The reason that happens is because either they're too focused on that, they think the market has not changed in the last year or so, or or they think that the market is still where it was about a year ago. So it's extremely important that you're always on a plane. When I say always on a plane, it doesn't mean literally that you burn through your cash and always going around the country. The fact is, you always need to be ready for going client facing. So if you're a budding entrepreneur, I would say spend 30% of your time internally on the product, 30% with your investors and prospective VCs, and 30% with your customers, and maybe another 10% internally from a what you call culture and day-to-day operations of the company. That's how I would kind of do the division of work. Now, we talked about the culture, we talked about pivoting the business model, we talked about how the VCs kind of work. I want to take a minute and see if there are any questions till now, or people, on what we have discussed, or even, if you have a contrarian opinion to what, I've talked about, we'll be happy to have a discussion.
Hello, Bhavesh. Vineet here from CII. We have got a question from one Mr. Balaji from Hyderabad. I think
Yes, sir.
you don't, though you have touched upon it a bit, but he says कि how much money should the entrepreneur look at investing himself or herself? Because whenever you get VCs, some
Right.
job has to be done before that to to have some product to showcase. So
Right,
what
right,
is
right.
there any thumb rule for some sort of investment ratio, 1:20, 1:30, or is it is your luck when you get it and before that you have to invest on your own?
Right. So that's a great question. So I think there are there are three ways to answer that, Mr. Balaji. I think it's a great question. The first and foremost is, if you're trying to build a product, or, before I answer that question, let me first give you a practical example of a similar situation. So we met this IoT company, which was in the, in this home replenishment space. Okay. What they were doing was that you have perishables at home, right? So you have bread, butter, milk, eggs, those kind of things. They had built an entire IoT solution in the US to do auto replenishment of that. So if you're working, and your milk got out, you didn't have to order it, through Amazon, or even through the IoT buttons even Amazon has. It would automatically, based on the weight, temperature, be able to order from the fridge. So they had built the solution. The problem they had run into it, they were able to buy and source all of the, products from sensors, readers, middleware perspective, but what they were not able to do was gather enough money, and they needed, if I remember correctly, about $70,000 to $80,000 just to do the prototype with one big internet retailer they had signed up with. Right now, the question is, in this case scenario, what would somebody do? Okay. Now, in this case, it's a no-brainer. They actually have to go and look for money. Why? Because they just don't have that kind of money. But if you don't have this kind of capex requirement, and you just have to build a product, then I would say the minimal viable product has to be done by you. So, like I said earlier, an ideal entrepreneur is somebody who has invested a large part of his own net worth. Okay, and VCs do the same. Like I said, VCs also invest their net worth in their VC funds. And somebody who's running the business and is not exactly looking for growth capital. So Mr. Balaji, to answer your question, you need to have maximum skin in the game till you reach a stage where you need a little bit of seed funding to actually grow the business. Okay, I do hope I've answered your question. So the more skin you have in the game, the more traction you have from customers, and you have validation of both technology and your concept, the more respect you will have from VCs and seed investors, and the more money you will be able to generate at a lower dilution.
Uh, there's another question, one from Ms. Krishna Gujral from Bombay. She
Sure.
mentioned that you just mentioned about your 30% ratios for segments like product development, investor relations, and customer relations. And but I would say basically a thumb rule. And you also mentioned about branding and marketing. So now
Right.
within that, how much of the budget, if somebody is investing on his own, from his own pocket, and hasn't been nothing with a VC, how much of the budget should the person keep for marketing branding apart from the logistics
Right.
expenses? How much it should be there for branding and marketing the product? Any
Right.
thumb rule for that?
Yeah. So, I would love to have an offline chat, ma'am, with you, and you're happy to send me an email. I'll chat with you. But I think the answer really is, in today's digital world, we can do fairly cheap, what do you call digital marketing. Okay. So when I said spend money on branding and marketing, what I meant was get the fundamentals right. If you are a corporate company, don't get a .net or a .org domain. Okay, it's better to change your name rather than get a name where you would like to have where you are forced to take a .org or a .edu domain. That's just an example. So to answer your question, I think there are very effective ways to do free or low cost marketing. Digital marketing allows you to do that. So if you are a B2B company, I would say most of your online ad spend should be concentrated at three places. Online business newspapers, so it could be Economic Times in India or Wall Street Journal in the US, LinkedIn, and Google AdWords. That's where you would do. If you're a B2C company, then you would drop Wall Street Journal and LinkedIn and move towards more Facebook-based advertising, right? So all those things. But pay attention. I'll give you another example. We come across startups, we ask them, what does your logo signify? What does it mean? What kind of a recall it has? And many of them, you'll be surprised when they say, hey, we went to this printer and he had a DTP guy, he just hooked up something. So, that's not the way to brand your startup. So it's extremely important to do that, because in the long run, these things do matter, right? And there are various case studies in the market of companies who have done better just because they've invested and spent time thinking about what their brand and logo, connotes. So I would say, not from a expenditure perspective, there's a fairly cheap way of doing these things. Paying attention to those things, getting help in those areas, I think those things are more important.
There is no other question right now, so Bhuvish, you can continue.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So again, I said the growth model. Many of us, I don't mean to say it in a derogatory way. Many of the entrepreneurs, are potentially dreamers, and they just stop executing. And I consider me also as a startup. A VC fund is also a startup which is investing in other startups. So we understand that predicament. You have to have that vision, but if you're a strong visionary and you don't have execution skills, please make sure that your co-founder has those skills. He has this ability to build the growth and execute on the vision on what you're trying to say. It's very important. And we come across this situation all the time. Great visionary founder, but no execution. Great execution, but no vision. And the VC funds do add to those capabilities, but let's face it, we are not in the business of running your company. We don't want to do that. We want to provide a soft touch, but ultimately that's where some of these situations lead to a non-funding kind of scenario. The other thing which I want to add is, I come across this all the time. When we look at companies in our portfolio, we say founding CTO. They don't have a strong technical person. Now everything is today, it's like nobody builds a desktop product anymore. Okay, you build a desktop product if you have Microsoft PowerPoint and you are at Microsoft. So I would say the founding CTO or the engineer who scales based on your vision is extremely important. And another example I'll give you, look at Amazon. If you read through some of his books, their first CTO was eventually let go because he did not scale to the requirements of where Amazon's growth model was. So that's why I say find a CTO and make sure that you have a CTO that scales. Now the problem there is CTOs are not easy to find, and if they are, their asking rate, and I've done this for some of my portfolio companies, is anywhere between 60 lakhs to 1 crore. And they come back to me and they say, we'll find a CTO or find some CTO once we have raised the capital. That again, I want to emphasize, VCs do not want to act like headhunters. They want to see a complete team. And actually, no VC will ever tell you this, but most VCs do not like single founding teams because they're not easy to manage. And it's too much of a risk from a legal perspective when only one person is a shareholder and apart from the VC. It's a lot of stress for them, right? So the founding team needs to have all the skills. So just to re-emphasize, the vision, the execution, and the technical engineering side, all three are extremely important. If you come and tell me that sales is an issue, yes, that can be fixed. You can find a sales guy who's willing to come in almost like as a co-founder with some good sales incentives. But the core team has to have all the core skills needed to make this capability and go to market. So it's important to do that. The other, the last thing I want to kind of emphasize is on the cultural side. Now that there is no point, the VC and the investment company should be, like I keep emphasizing, like in a marriage. You don't hide anything from anyone. right? And if you bring the bad news, if you have a bad news, bring the bad news first, because the VCs are not going to reprimand you for that. This is not a school student teacher kind of a relationship. We are in this collaboratively. If you falter, I falter automatically, and I provide no returns to my investors. Ultimately, like I said, the VCs are in the business of providing shareholder returns to their limited partners. And we are also have a huge skin in the game because our own capital is also involved, right? So bring the bad news and need to look at them as a team. If you can't do that, then honestly, if you don't have that feeling that they can add value, so how can VCs add value? They can make introductions. So this is beyond the growth capital or the risk capital which they have provided. If they don't understand your domain, don't go for that VC. If they can't make an introduction for you, don't do it. Okay, they are not the right fit for you. If they do not have companies in your space or have done that, don't do it. Those are things which you need to learn as part of your own qualification process, whether this VC is a good fit with me or not. Okay, you will always have challenges on the valuation, right? You would expect every entrepreneur thinks he has the best product and he should be valued a certain X. But the fact of the matter is, valuation is not an exact science, no matter what you look at it. It's based on a discounted rate on future earnings, and those future earnings are frankly a bit of a hogwash. So the cultural factors on selecting a VC are more important. When I did advisory, investment advisory, I used to tell a lot of my clients that you would rather go with a tier 2 or a tier 3 VC because they understand this space than go to a tier 1 VC because of the just the brand name they bring to the market. So those cultural things are extremely important, and just apart from the capital, because otherwise what we will have is acrimonious board meetings where the vision will not match, and then either they will replace the management team or you will sell your stake and move out, and that's not going to be good for anyone. So you want to be able to be in a preventive mode from that to kind of happen. So that's all I had to say in the the 35 minutes. We've got 2 very good questions already, but I'm happy to take another 10-15 minutes of Q&A. And if you would like to write to me, these are my coordinates. Please feel free to call me, anything VNCI can do for you, we'll be happy to do.